For decades, Maury Povich stood at the center of family truth and DNA revelations. Calm voice, one envelope, and a sentence that could change lives forever. But some stories never made it to that famous stage. Some truths were too heavy, even for the brightest studio lights. This is one of those stories. I'm not the villain of this story. At least I never thought I was. But I suppose that's what all villains say. My name is Carla. I'm 41 years old. I've been married to my husband Ryan for 18 years. We have 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, a house in the suburbs, a dog named Biscuit, the kind of life that looks perfect in Christmas card photos. But perfect is a lie. And I've been lying for 12 years. It happened on a Tuesday night. Ryan was home with the kids. I told him I was going to a work conference in the city, an overnight event, networking dinners, the usual corporate nonsense. He believed me. He had no reason not to. I had never lied to him before. Not about anything important, not about anything that mattered. But that night I wasn't at a conference. I was at a hotel room downtown with his best friend Marcus. I need to explain how we got there. Marcus had been part of our lives since before Ryan and I were married. They met in college freshman year and had been inseparable ever since. When Ryan proposed to me, Marcus was the first person he called. When we got married, Marcus was the best man. When our first son was born, Marcus was at the hospital, pacing the waiting room like a nervous father himself. He was family. But somewhere along the way, he became something else. It started innocently. Text messages, inside jokes, the kind of flirty banter that married people sometimes engage in with friends, telling themselves it doesn't mean anything. But it did mean something. Every message made my heart beat faster. Every notification with his name made me smile in a way I hadn't smiled in years. Every conversation felt electric, alive, dangerous in a way that my marriage had stopped feeling long ago. Ryan was a good husband, a good father, but we had fallen into a routine. The same conversations, the same dinners, the same predictable intimacy that felt more like obligation than passion. Marcus made me feel wanted, desired, seen, and that was intoxicating. The texting became phone calls. Late at night, after Ryan fell asleep, I would slip into the bathroom, close the door, and whisper into the phone for hours. Marcus would tell me about his day, his dreams, his fears. I would tell him things I had never told Ryan. Secrets, doubts, desires I didn't even know I had. We were having an emotional affair. I knew it was wrong. I knew I was betraying my husband with every whispered conversation, but I told myself it wasn't real cheating. We hadn't touched. We hadn't kissed. As long as it stayed in the realm of words, I could pretend it was harmless. But words have a way of becoming actions. The conference was Marcus's idea. Tell Ryan you have a work event, he said. One night, just the 2 of us. No pressure, just time together. I should have said no. I should have ended the affair right there, confessed to Ryan, and tried to save my marriage before it was too late. But I didn't. I booked the hotel. I packed an overnight bag. I kissed my husband goodbye, hugged my children, and drove to a downtown hotel where another man was waiting. That night changed everything. I won't describe what happened. You can imagine. What I will say is that it felt like coming alive after years of sleepwalking. It felt like oxygen after drowning. It felt like everything my marriage hadn't been for a very long time. And when it was over, lying in that hotel bed with Marcus beside me, I felt 2 things simultaneously. The most intense happiness I had experienced in years, and the most crushing guilt. I went home the next morning. Ryan was in the kitchen making pancakes. The kids were fighting over the remote. Biscuit was barking at a squirrel through the window. Everything was exactly the same as when I left. But I was different. I had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I had done something that would destroy my family if it ever came to light. How was the conference? Ryan asked, kissing my cheek. Fine, I said. Boring, the usual. The lie came so easily, it terrified me. I told myself it was a one-time thing, a mistake, a lapse in judgment, something that would never happen again. But it did happen again, the next month, and the month after that. Stolen nights when Ryan thought I was traveling for work. Afternoon meetings that were actually hotel rooms. A double life that became easier to maintain the longer it went on. Marcus and I were careful. No digital trail, no suspicious charges. We communicated through a secret messaging app that deleted everything automatically. We thought we were untouchable. We were wrong. 3 months after the affair started, I found out I was pregnant. I stared at the positive test for 20 minutes. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped it twice. Pregnant. Ryan and I hadn't been intimate in almost 2 months. He had been stressed about work, exhausted by the time he came home. We kept saying we would reconnect, but it never happened, which meant the baby wasn't his. It couldn't be. I considered my options. I could end the pregnancy. No one would ever know. The affair could stay buried, and my marriage could continue as if nothing had happened. Or I could tell Ryan the truth, confess everything, accept whatever consequences came, or I could lie. I could seduce my husband that weekend, make him believe the baby was his, and hope that no one ever discovered the truth. I chose option 3. It was easier than I expected. Ryan was surprised but happy when I initiated intimacy that Saturday night. He thought I was finally making an effort to reconnect. He thought our marriage was turning a corner. In a way it was, just not the corner he imagined. 8 months later, our daughter was born. We named her Sophie. She had dark hair and blue eyes like Marcus. But Ryan's mother also had blue eyes, so no one questioned it. Ryan was overjoyed. He had always wanted a daughter. He carried Sophie everywhere, showed her off to everyone, called her his little princess. And every time he said those words, I felt a knife twist in my chest, because Sophie wasn't his daughter. She was Marcus's. I ended the affair after Sophie was born. I told Marcus it was over. The guilt was too much. The risk was too high. I had a daughter now, his daughter, and I needed to protect her from the truth. Marcus was devastated. He begged me to leave Ryan. He said we could be a real family. Him, me, Sophie, away from all the lies, but I couldn't do it. I loved Ryan. Despite everything, I still loved him, and I loved the life we had built together. I wasn't willing to destroy it, even if it was already built on a foundation of betrayal. So I ended things with Marcus, and I buried the secret deeper than ever. 12 years passed. Sophie grew up. She became smart, athletic, confident. She had Ryan's sense of humor and my stubbornness. She was the light of our family. Marcus stayed in our lives, but at a distance. He got married, had his own children, moved to a different neighborhood. We saw him at holidays, at birthday parties, at the occasional barbecue. He never said anything. He never even looked at Sophie with anything other than casual friendliness. We had both agreed to take the secret to our graves, but secrets have a way of refusing to stay buried. It started with a school project. Sophie's 8th grade science class was doing a unit on genetics, blood types, hereditary traits, Punnett squares, basic biology. One of the assignments was to create a family genetic chart. Sophie was supposed to collect blood type information from her parents and grandparents and map out the inheritance patterns. She came home excited about the project. She asked Ryan and me for our blood types. Ryan is type B positive. I'm type A positive. Sophie looked at her own records from a recent doctor's visit. She was type O negative. And suddenly her excitement turned to confusion. "That doesn't make sense," she said. She had learned in class that 2 parents with type B and type A blood could not have a child with type O blood. The genetics didn't work. "Maybe there's a mistake," Ryan said, not thinking much of it. "Hospital records get mixed up all the time." But Sophie was stubborn, like me. She started researching. She read articles about blood type inheritance. She watched videos explaining genetic combinations. And the more she learned, the more certain she became. Something was wrong. Sophie didn't tell us what she was planning. She ordered a DNA ancestry kit with her birthday money. She swabbed her cheek, mailed it back, and waited. 3 weeks later, she got the results. And everything I had buried for 12 years came crashing to the surface. The DNA relatives section showed a match. Not Ryan, not anyone in Ryan's family. Marcus's daughter, from his marriage, showed up as Sophie's half-sister. A 26% DNA match, consistent with sharing one parent. Sophie stared at the results for hours. She didn't understand at first. How could Marcus's daughter be her half-sister? Unless Marcus was her father, too. Sophie confronted me alone. She waited until Ryan was at work and her brothers were at school. The house was silent, empty, just the 2 of us, sitting at the kitchen table where we had shared 1,000 family dinners. years. Sophie placed her phone on the table and slid it toward me. The DNA results were on the screen. The match with Marcus's daughter. The percentages that proved everything I had tried to hide. Explain this, she said. Her voice was cold, hard, controlled in a way that reminded me of Ryan when he was angry. She had inherited his temperament, even if she hadn't inherited his genes. I looked at the screen, I looked at my daughter, and I felt 12 years of carefully constructed lies crumbling around me. I could have denied it. I could have claimed the test was wrong, that there must be some laboratory error, some contamination, some explanation other than the obvious truth. But looking into my daughter's eyes that were Marcus's blue, not Ryan's brown, I knew there was no point. She was too smart, too stubborn, too determined to accept a lie. I'm sorry, I whispered. The words felt pathetic, inadequate, like trying to put a bandage on a bullet wound. Sophie's face crumbled. The cold composure disappeared, replaced by something raw and wounded. So it's true? Dad isn't my real father? Marcus is? I nodded. I couldn't speak anymore. The tears were coming too fast. Does Dad know? No, he doesn't know anything. I never told anyone. Sophie slammed her fist on the table so hard the salt shaker fell over. How could you do this? How could you lie to all of us for 12 years? How could you let Dad believe I was his daughter? How could you let me believe it? I didn't have an answer. There was no answer that would make this better. No words that could undo what I had done. Sophie told Ryan that night she couldn't keep the secret. She refused to be part of the lie. So she sat her father down, the man who had raised her, loved her, believed she was his, and she told him everything. I watched from the doorway as Ryan's face went through every emotion imaginable. Confusion, disbelief, denial, and finally, devastation. He looked at me. Is this true? I couldn't speak. I just nodded. Ryan stood up from the table. He walked past me without a word. He grabbed his keys, walked out the front door, and drove away. He didn't come home for 3 days. When he finally returned, he asked for a divorce. He came through the front door, looking like a man who had aged 10 years in 3 days. His clothes were wrinkled. His eyes were red. He hadn't shaved. He sat down at the kitchen table and looked at me with an expression that contained no anger, just emptiness. I've thought about this for 3 days, he said. I've tried to find a way to forgive you. I've tried to understand how you could have lied for so long, how you could have watched me raise another man's daughter and said nothing. He paused. I can't find a way. I will never trust you again. I didn't fight it. I couldn't. I had betrayed him in the worst possible way. I had let him raise another man's child as his own. I had stolen 12 years of truth from him. The divorce was finalized within 6 months. Ryan got the house. I got an apartment across town. The boys chose to live with their father. Sophie, ironically, chose to live with me, the woman who had lied to her entire life. I'm angry at you, she said, but you're still my mom. Marcus and I don't speak anymore. His marriage ended too, once his wife found out. He tried to reach out to Sophie to build a relationship with his biological daughter, but Sophie refused. Ryan is my dad, she said. He raised me. He loved me. I don't need another father. Marcus accepted that. He faded into the background, a ghost of my greatest mistake. Ryan eventually forgave Sophie. It took time. Months of therapy, painful conversations where old wounds were reopened and examined. But eventually, he was able to separate his love for her from his anger at me. He's still her father. He still comes to her soccer games. He still calls her his little princess. Because fatherhood isn't about DNA. It's about showing up. I live alone now. The boys visit sometimes. Sophie stays with me every other week. I see Ryan at school events, at graduations, at the moments that matter. We're polite, distant. Two people who used to love each other, now bound only by children and shared history. I think about that Tuesday night often. The hotel room, the choice I made, how different everything would be if I had said no. But I can't change the past. I can only live with it. For decades, Maury Povich stood at the center of family truth and DNA revelations. Calm voice, one envelope, and a sentence that could change lives forever. But this story didn't need a stage. It only needed a daughter brave enough to demand the truth and a family strong enough to survive it.